welcome to Focus Today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson, and what a delight to have back with us our good friend David Rubin, former mayor of Shiloh, Israel, and he's the founder and president of the Shiloh Israel Children's Fund, which was established to assist terrorist victims and their children, actually after he and his son were wounded in the terror attack. He's an incredible blogger there at the Israel National News, and the author of quite a few books, and many of them are very good. In fact, The Islamic Tsunami is a must-read, and his latest book, you got to get a copy of it, Sparks from Zion. So we want to talk to him today about the proposed deal between the United States and Iran. David, good to see you, my friend. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Good to be with you, Perry.
Yeah, good to see you. Well, listen, a lot going on, and as you can imagine here, it's not a done deal with the Congress over the Israeli negotiations, with the Iran negotiations over the nuclear weapons. What's the take there in Israel?
Well, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. There's virtually nobody in Israel who believes that this deal with Iran over their nuclear program is a good deal. And you could look at the right of the political spectrum, the left of the political spectrum, the center of the political spectrum. There is virtually no person in Israel who believes that this deal is a good deal and that it should be signed. Virtually nobody here believes that the Iranians have abandoned their intention to destroy Israel, and therefore nobody's in favor of this agreement.
You're actually calling the deal an existential threat to Israel. Is that true?
Oh, there's not even a question about that. It is absolutely an existential threat to Israel. All you have to do is look at the elements that are in this agreement, and you see that any common sense thinking person, anyone who has a modicum of thought left in his brain would not agree that this is a good deal. There's virtually nothing in this agreement that is not to the benefit of Iran. They're looking to get money. They're looking to get big money. And they're going to have it from this agreement. The removal of sanctions gives them billions of dollars instantly. And we know what they do with those billions of dollars. They don't try to improve the quality of the bread that people put on their tables. They don't put it into having more produce and better produce in the supermarkets. What they do when they have money is that they give it to terrorist organizations and they use it to build nuclear weapons. That is the intent of the Iranians. They say when they speak in their language, they say that that's their intent. I say we should stop believing them.
You know, it's been very interesting on this side, David, to see that our government would give money to an enemy to turn around and kill us and kill you. It makes no sense, and yet it's being propagated as bringing peace to that part of the world. Does anybody in that region believe it?
Well, I don't think that anyone believes it, frankly. When you ask that question, I think of the Hezbollah terrorists or Bashar Assad in Syria, who are allies of Iran. But I don't think they believe that it's going to bring peace either. They know that it's not going to bring peace, and they don't care. They want to have more terrorism in the area. They want to increase the bedlam in the area. So they're very happy to have this agreement. It'll enable them to increase the terrorism. It'll enable them to support the various terrorist groups. I'm just amazed that anyone would be suckered in by such an agreement. If I was looking to hide something, well, I certainly wouldn't invite inspectors to come into my home and to do a search. I wouldn't encourage the police to come into my home if there was something that I had to hide. But in this situation, the Iranians obviously are trying to hide something. They're saying that they're not building nuclear bombs, but the proof is in the pudding. If they say that 24 hours, that if they said that 24 hours is the amount of time that they need to be warned in advance before nuclear inspectors come into their facilities, well, I would say, well, that might be okay. That might be a good deal. But they're being given 24 days before nuclear inspectors that come in to inspect their nuclear facilities. Well, in 24 days, you can hide a lot. And, so it's absolutely absurd. The facts of this agreement, it's going to fuel an arms race throughout the Middle East. The other countries, not just Israel. Yes, it's an existential threat to Israel because we're a tiny country that is, maybe a fifth of the size of Oregon. But if you look at the other countries in the Middle East, that's where it gets really interesting. You see Saudi Arabia, which is a huge country, which is terrified of the Iranians getting a nuclear bomb, and they are very strongly against this agreement, and which really says a lot. I mean, whatever I think of Saudi Arabia, whatever I think of their ideology or their social policies or how they treat people who don't follow their limits, their way of life. They're no better than Iran in that. But Saudi Arabia is terrified because they're Sunni Muslims. The Iranians are Shiite Muslims, and Sunnis and Shiites don't get along. So Saudi Arabia is secretly in consultation with Israel to find out what they can do to help Israel to stop Iran. And that's where it really gets interesting.
Yeah, that is amazing. Is that a coalition that could be trusted?
Well, look, politics is the art of what you're able to accomplish, and so in a case like this, the Saudi Arabians are willing to, they're willing to cooperate with what they see as the devil, which is Israel. They're willing to cooperate with anyone that will save their kingdom. And so at this point, I mean, we haven't seen the concrete cooperation in terms of direct action against Iran yet at this point. But what's interesting is that Saudi Arabia, which is, in the past has been a very good friend of Obama, and they've helped Obama in many ways, and Obama bowed down to the former king of Saudi Arabia, who passed away since then. So despite all that, they are very much against the Obama administration on this agreement, and they are with Israel.
Part of that would be, wouldn't it be airspace access? I mean, if Israel decides to go in and do some kind of a military strike against the nuclear facilities there in Iran, they would have to fly over Saudi Arabia to get it there, so it'd have to be kind of somewhat of an airspace agreement, wouldn't it?
That's correct. The agreement would have to include something relating to airspace. We have to remember again that Israel is a tiny country, and so someone in the United States could understand it if I say that we're about the size of New Jersey, roughly. And a country the size of New Jersey doesn't have that much airspace. And if you want to launch a preemptive strike against a country like Iran, with which you don't share a border, you have to fly over other countries. And Saudi Arabia is a nice big country, and yes, that actually would make a lot of sense if such an agreement could be reached. Obviously, any agreement that would be reached, any cooperation that would be reached between Israel and Saudi Arabia, or a country like Saudi Arabia, That would have to be done secretly, because in the Islamic world, it's absolutely a no-no to have a good relationship with Israel.
All right, let me take a quick break. We'll be back, but let me just say to our viewers and listeners, you can go to ShilohIsraelChildren.org. You can go to DavidRubinIsrael.com and check out his books. And let me encourage you to prayerfully consider supporting the Shiloh Israel Fund. It's an outstanding organization that helps children. So we'll be right back with David Rubin in just a moment.
Hi, I'm Paulina, and I work at theDove TV. Did you know that when you support theDove TV, you have a profound impact, not only in our community, but around the world? It's your continued support that takes the inspiration and hope in the programs we produce and makes them available to the thousands of people who are watching these videos online every week. Help bring encouragement and hope to our valley and beyond by making a secure online donation today at our website, thedove.us.
Okay, we're back with our good friend David Rubin. We're Skyping him in from Israel. He's the former mayor of Shiloh, Israel, and he's the founder and the president of the Shiloh Israel Children's Fund. And this was established to assist terrorist victims, especially children, of which he and his son, young son, were wounded as in an act of terror themselves. He's the author of many books, and you may want to check out a couple of them. The Islamic Tsunami, which is an incredible resource, and his latest book called Sparks from Zion. And you can also follow him. He's a pretty prolific blogger at Israel National News. We're talking to him today from Israel about what's going on with the proposed plan or agreement between the United States and Iran. David, given everything we've discussed so far, what do you think Israel's response going to be if this thing is signed and agreed upon by the Congress?
Well, I think that there are really two questions. There's the question of what Israel's response will be, and the question of what Israel's response should be. Now, I think as far as what it will be, it's very possible that there will be continued political action, a lot of consultation between Israel and the Congress. I know that the Obama administration is feverishly working to try and ensure that it has the ability to veto any decision by Congress to strike down this agreement. And Congress, of course, there are members of Congress that are trying very hard to ensure that there is a veto-proof majority against the agreement in Congress. But even so, even if Congress manages to reject the agreement, and even if Obama cannot veto that agreement, I think that there is a problem here. Because this agreement wasn't just with the United States. The agreement was with Russia and China and the United Kingdom, several other countries. And these countries are already lining up and making deals with Iran for them it's a business deal, but for Israel, it's an existential danger. And even if Congress strikes down the deal, I think that those other countries aren't going to be on board as far as increasing sanctions once again. So the Iranians are going to be getting billions of dollars either way. Now, mind you, I'm not saying that the Congress shouldn't strike down the deal. Of course, everything should be done to try and get Congress to stop this agreement. But if Congress is not successful in totally stopping the agreement, I still think that the military action has to be explored, and obviously there should not be any military action unless Israel believes that it's going to be successful. And of course there's no guarantee of that, but we have some very knowledgeable people here in Israel when it comes to military, when it comes to military intelligence, And I hope that they will be as competent as they need to be, because I suspect that no matter what happens in Congress, the military option is going to be the only option. And sometimes the military option is a good option.
Now, I think most people agree with that and support it, but I think you need to remind our listeners that if Israel decides that a military strike is the only option, it's not a matter of just getting clearance to go over Saudi Arabia's airspace to do the strike, but at the same time and simultaneously, you're going to have to protect the rest of your borders from those who would be upset with you doing that. I mean, it's more than just an airstrike.
That's correct. It's a multi-site airstrike. If that has to happen, there are about, at least 5 sites in Iran that are major nuclear research sites, and those are the sites that would need to be hit, and they're spread out around the country. So it wouldn't just be attacking one specific nuclear reactor. In Iraq, about 30 years ago, Israel destroyed a nuclear reactor. In Syria, about 5 years ago, Israel destroyed a nuclear reactor. But it was a pinpoint strike, and that was enough. Here we're talking about a lightning strike that would be needed, a massive lightning strike in several locations. And that's not such an easy thing to do. So it would be nice to have at least passive American support in such an operation, because the United States does have some military equipment that Israel doesn't have.
The other day, one of the presidential candidates, former governor of Arkansas, Mike Huckabee, he's one of the 17 running, you know that. He made an interesting comment that this proposed deal with Iran would march Israel to the oven's door. And it got a lot of pushback, and yet it also got a lot of support. How did you respond to it, and how did Prime Minister Netanyahu respond to that comment?
Well, I didn't hear any comments from the Prime Minister, but I can tell you what I think about it. Obviously, former Governor Huckabee was referring to the ovens in which millions of Jews were killed, and specifically 1 million who were killed just in the Auschwitz concentration camp alone during the Holocaust. And so some people thought that it was an overreaction, an exaggeration that should never be said. Some people say you should never cite the Holocaust. Well, look, the Holocaust was an event in history like no other. And 6 million Jews were murdered simply for being who they are. And I think that what's essential, even though we should be cautious about what kind of language we use when referring to the Holocaust or citing the Holocaust to refer to something else, it is an event in history like no other. And here we are talking about a similar event. It's not a careless use of imagery. It is a similar event that the Iranians would like to carry out. The only difference between what the Iranians would like to do to us right now by getting a nuclear bomb and what the Nazis did to us is that the Nazis had to carry it out over a period of about 6 years. The Iranians could do it in just one day if they're successful at it. They could destroy Israel in just one day with a nuclear bomb. So I think that the statement of Governor Huckabee was right on target. I think that it's making it very clear that there is an existential danger, as I've been saying over and over. It is an existential danger to the very survival of Israel. And I think that those who were blasting him and those who were criticizing him, well, I think they were mainly doing it for political reasons. They don't want to see him rise in the polls in the Republican Party or have a significant position of any kind in the Republican Party. But he's a great friend of Israel.
It's unbelievable to us in the faith community in the United States that we have a runaway presidency. We have a weak Congress that doesn't seem to keep it in check. We are in constitutional crises. And the message that we're sending to Israel is, we really aren't for you. We're willing to make a deal where your enemy could wipe you out in one day, as you just mentioned. Is there any indication coming from the United States to Israel that the majority of the faith community is not with this decision?
Well, it seems like the Republican Party is very strongly against the agreement. The Republican Party actually is the right wing of the spectrum and the more religious wing of the political spectrum in the United States. I am going to be very interested in watching the Republican candidates debate on Thursday. I hope that there will be a question in there about Israel, and I hope there'll be a question in there about the Iran deal. And I would like to hear some substance coming from those candidates. One thing that I have heard from Huckabee over time is a lot of substance. He speaks very strongly in favor of Israel. He speaks against the Palestinian state, which would just be another Islamic terrorist state in the heartland of Israel. He speaks against Israel giving away parts of its biblical heartland. I've been very pleased with a lot of things that I've heard from Huckabee. I'd like to hear it from the other candidates. I'd like to hear it from Trump. I'd like to hear from Rubio, from Rand Paul, from Jeb Bush, from Scott Walker. I'd like to hear that they stand with Israel and Israel's territorial integrity, that they're against giving away parts of Israel, dividing the land, which we know is something that's forbidden biblically, and we also know that it would be a big mistake politically for Israel to do. So I'm going to be watching very carefully, and I will be writing about it and speaking about it afterwards.
And I'll be glad to have you back quickly after that, just to hear your comments. David, thank you. You're always a delight to have. Our prayers continue to be with you, my friend. And let me encourage our viewers and listeners, there's several ways you can communicate with him and get his books. Look for his books there. They are available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. The two that I recommend, at least, he's got a lot of them, but the two that you may want to pick up right away is The Islamic Tsunami, and then his latest book, Sparks from Zion. You can go to shilohisraelchildren.org. You can communicate with him with davidrubin.israel.com. So, David, thanks, my friend. Let's stay in touch, okay?
Sounds good. Thank you, Perry.
All right, God bless. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Paula, and I work at theDove TV. Every day we get letters and emails from people who've been encouraged, blessed, and challenged by the programs on theDove TV. But we couldn't do it without you. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to bring inspiration and hope to our community by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us, or call us at 541-776-5368.
Well, welcome back. Delighted to have in the studio a couple of academics. I think I'll just sit over here in the corner. No, I'm delighted to have back with us Pastor Rick Booye. He's a former president of Pacific Bible College, and John Osborne, who's the new Pacific Bible College Chief Academic Officer. There we go. Got them all. And good to see you guys. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
How you doing, Rick? Good to see you, man.
Good to see you.
Introduce John to us.
Well, John Osborne comes to us from a career in administrating colleges, and we are very happy to have him as the CAO for PBC. Chief Academic Officer oversees all the programs and makes sure that they interface well with the other colleges that we deal with, and there are a lot of new things going on that are really, really exciting at PBC with regard to that. Our candidacy status with ABHE, National recognition for the units and so on. And so John is incredibly helpful, and he's taken a lot of load off of some of us who aren't as good at that, and we've been trying to kind of keep it together. And so we're very happy to have him with us.
Well, John, welcome.
Glad to be here. Yeah.
How's that process going?
Well, first of all, it's exciting. So, last February we got approved for our candidacy status with ABHE, which is our accrediting body. And so we're on that track towards moving towards a fully accredited institution. And so we have a timeline for that. And so this year, with the addition of my position at the college, which is the first time they've had a full-time administrator in that realm, and this year we also added a dean of students. So I'd love to have Daniel Nicholas come over here and meet with you and talk about his new role. And so we're going to be on that path and move towards doing all the things that we need to do to help our students get into that realm of being able to move out into pathways into other places and other higher levels of education. So,
you know, people need to know that this hasn't happened overnight. This progress has been going on how long, Rick, to get to this status, to get to what they call the candidacy status?
Well, just since it began, at least 5 years. 5 years. In beginning in earnest, wasn't it about 5 years ago?
It began with Mike, of course, Mike Robinson, our president, starting the process, and then it was the end of 2011, early 2012. As a matter of fact, that's the last time I was sitting here with you, was discussing that process of how we were going to move towards that. So early 2012 is when we really started our self-study process, developed a really intricate strategic plan for that, and moved from there.
What's the timeline ahead?
Once you've achieved this status, you have a 5-year timeline. And of course, we had the same 5-year timeline before to get to candidacy, and we achieved that. The Lord was really good to us in February, and we were acknowledged for the work that we had, and ABHE believes that we're an institution that can move from where we are now to accreditation within 5 years. So we're hoping to do it earlier than that, but we will put all the right things in place, and we're going to get there.
All right, let me just say to our viewers and listeners, jot this website down, pacificbible.com. pacificbible.com. That's the website right here in Medford, right here in your own backyard. An incredible opportunity to advance your Bible education, and now in an accredited status, and this is all heading in the right direction. So Rick, you've decided to take on Romans class this fall.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And I couldn't think of a better book more appropriate for the season in which we're living.
Yeah, you're right.
What are you going to do here?
Well, I've been teaching Romans at PBC for years, and I enjoy it. It's one of my favorite subjects, one of the electives in the Bible program there. But you just finished an interview with a gentleman from Israel, and Romans actually explains how the gospel relates to individual people of all races, all around the world, but then it also explains how the gospel relates to Israel, and that is a very interesting and not uncontroversial topic. And then it explains in the last section from chapter 12 to 16 how this affects us as individuals within society, within the church, and how the church can have an impact on the world around it. So it is a powerful book. I mean, Martin Luther, the reformer, said everybody ought to memorize Romans. They ought to read Romans all the time, every day. And it's an explanation of the gospel that pretty much once you get it, it transforms your view of the whole world and specifically gives you some insight about God's plans for Israel.
Well, I would say to anybody that is struggling with the culture as you see it today, sign up and take this class. You ought to have a couple hundred in this class, given the climate of which we live. Yeah. And I don't know how you're going to get past Romans 1.
No, it is hard to get it all in there. It really is, because the students will ask many questions. There's so much in there, and there's a lot of things. I hate to be hypercritical of ourselves as Christians, but many people say they believe Romans, and then when they read it, they go, I didn't know it said that. It's like, whoa, that's really amazing. Yeah. And so, it's hard to even get past chapter 1, but we do get through the whole book, and we have collateral reading in it. It's a college course. So.
Well, it's a college course. Can they I say audit, can they take the class as a
audit
degree student,
yes.
as an audit? So you could audit this class, and I would encourage you to do it, and that'll be starting up in September. Go to pacificbible.com. That's the best way to do it, pacificbible.com. And so, John, that brings me back to you. People who want to start the course of a Bible training, going to PBC, what are they in for, and how long would it? How's it set up? I mean, they go through it in 2 years, 3 years. What's the deal?
The Biblical Studies program is a 2-year program. So students would come in, they can begin in a fall semester like we have coming up, and then they can complete the cycle of courses that they need to do with that within 2 years.
2 years.
So.
And how many units have they taken?
It's right around 62 semester credit hours is where the credits are.
And then when all of the accreditation's done, that's transferable stuff. That's what you're going for.
Yeah. Well, currently we have multiple articulation agreements. So we have for example, with Simpson University and Corbin, Northwest Christian University, we have articulation agreements currently where our credit is accepted at those other Bible colleges. And we're going to grow that this coming year too.
Right. So Pacific Bible gives you an opportunity to get your foot in the door and see if you like it and if you want to continue with it. And I tell you what, your first semester in Bible college will just pretty much turn your life upside down.
Well, it makes you think.
It does.
Makes you think,
It
and
really does.
That's a good thing.
It's a good thing, and it heals you of procrastination.
Yeah.
I would never forget, first semester I was in Pentateuch, and the first test came out, and the excuses that the students had for not turning their homework in, it was, from the Lord had me do this, and I was involved in that, and I was doing this in my church. And I'll never forget the professor walking down between the desk, and he just goes, F, F, F. He flunked them all.
Yeah.
And that,
we try
that heals you just like that.
For those of you who are listening, we're trying not to do that.
No, I just think though and then all of a sudden the class got serious. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And oh man, and then some of the stuff that came out, it's life changing. So I want to encourage you to prayerfully consider investing your life and your time into taking some classes at Pacific Bible College right here in Medford. You can go to pacificbible.com, and day classes now, right?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Day classes, evening classes.
So the schedule's probably there to work for you. And Pastor Rick's going to be doing Romans again. I can't think of anything. How do you squeeze that book into a few weeks?
Well, it is difficult, but it's still more than most people would get under normal circumstances where you're dealing with the text. But you could spend 6 months just studying that, and many have spent their whole lives just studying it. It's so deep, and it's such an explanation of the gospel itself that you can set the plow as deep as you want in that book and still need to go back and do it again. Mm-hmm. But this is a college level introductory course focused on how the gospel affects us as individuals and how it affects the world. And it's a massive change in our worldview when you see what Paul says about it. Right there in the first 4 verses, he explains what the gospel is. And then for the first 8 chapters, there's 3 sections in Romans. If you drop it from 3 feet, it will break into 3 pieces. 1 to 8, 9 to 11, 12 to 16. That first section, ending with that crescendo in chapter 8, there's therefore now no condemnation for those that are in Christ Jesus, and the hope of the new creation, and you can't be separated from the love of God. This is completely life-changing. I've seen students when we're sitting there, and they know this material. They've read it as Christians, and I just see their eyes open up. I had a translator in Russia. I taught this in Russia a couple of times at a couple of seminaries. And my translator was not a Christian, and he got to Romans 8, and he was translating the lecture and reading it in Russian out of his Russian Bible. And he actually stopped what I was saying and looked at me and said in English, which his students could not understand English. He said to me, "Is this true?" He got halfway through Romans 8. We're explaining to the guy, and he looked at me, and he just sort of stopped, and it was between him and me. And he said, "Is this really true?" And I said, "Yes." And I got a chance to really share the Lord with him.
Wow.
They had brought him into the seminary because the regular translator was sick, and he had worked for Russian intelligence. He was a complete atheist, but he knew English. So it's the first time he had ever actually seen the scriptures, and he had to say them and read them and say what I was saying. So the gospel was going right through this guy, and he stopped in Romans 8, and it was so wonderful. I got to talk to him at the break and then over the next few days about the Lord. It's life-changing.
And I think that's also one of the reasons I wanted Rick to talk about this experience today, because that question, is this really true?
Yeah.
I mean, our goal currently and our vision currently is that we're going to educate and develop the Christian mind to engage the culture of today. And so what I was telling Rick was Romans itself has so much in it about why we're at where we are as a culture, how we can change that, and then how cultures can stand and shine. And that's what we want to be about in our future. So as we move forward in our next 5 years, this coming year, we're going to add a new degree program, and it's going to be built in a liberal arts tradition. It's going to prepare a student's mind, the Christian mind, to defend the faith and to engage in truth in all different walks of life. Doesn't matter if you're whether you're talking about geology, biology, physics. Doesn't matter if you're in the realm of mathematics, theology, literature, music. We're going to engage the culture on all those fronts currently, and so this year we're going to make a big growth and add another program and develop that.
That's an exciting program.
Well, folks, this doesn't get any better. PacificBible.com, go there. Let me tell you, it will be life-changing. You could just start by taking Romans with Pastor Rick's class. But with John there leading the way, and you may want to get involved in the whole curriculum and move forward, believe me, it will change your life, and it's all for the good. And what a way to learn how to engage the culture. This is classic stuff. This is what it's all about. You guys are dealing with the two questions that we get with all the correspondence that goes on here at the Dove. It boils down to two things. What is truth, and who can I trust? That's the Christian's golden hour to deliver the goods.
Absolutely.
So, all right, PacificBible.com. Check it out, PacificBible.com. John, Rick, thanks, buddies. Good to see you guys. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Daniel, and I work at theDove TV. Compared to Portland, Seattle, and LA, Medford might be considered a small market. But at theDove, we're excited about the opportunity to make a big impact right here in our community. And you help make that happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us now by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us, or by phoning 541-776-5368.
All right, welcome back, and delighted to have back with us Ted Brower. He has more energy than one man should be allowed to have. I don't know what he puts on his cereal in the morning, but I want some of it. He's America's leading nutritionist and biochemist and author of Breakthrough Health. You can go to his website, bodybyted.com. And we want to talk about something that's very much in the news today, as we've heard about gender transition, but in particular, chemical gender manipulation. Oh, really? Hey, Ted, good to see you, man. How are you?
Hey, Perry, I'm doing great. Good to be back on with you guys again. We're going to talk about that today, but there's some other stuff out there too we're going to talk about. We've had a lot of doctors that have dropped dead down here suddenly have departed the planet, and some of the research they were working on with autism and a compound called GCMAF is pretty interesting, because these guys were actually finding a way to combat autism, heart disease, and diabetes without the use of drugs. And suddenly a whole group of them that were working on this have departed the planet. And so we can talk about that some too, because that's a really interesting topic, and it's all on what's going on with the vaccines, what's in the vaccines, and what's called a macrophage, or that's a little vacuum cleaner in the body that cleans up cancer and virus cells. And apparently there's something in the virus, something in these immunizations, or being introduced somehow into the body. We don't know how. Apparently these guys have figured out. It's called nagalase. And nagalase strips off the vitamin D receptor sites on the macrophage, rendering the macrophages useless, which causes what's called a cytokine storm, which is causing encephalitic screams in these young infants and brain damage in these infants, and some people believe leaking into autism. And so that's a pretty interesting topic. If you want to cover some of that, I can make it really, really simple. What it is, a macrophage is a garbage disposal, a vacuum cleaner, so to speak, in the cell. And what happens, it has to have a certain adapter to it, which allows vitamin D to attach to it. And if the vitamin D can't attach to it, that macrophage can't work, and the vitamin D can't be utilized. And it causes what's called a cytokine storm, where that vacuum cleaner starts running in reverse, starts blowing about a bunch of chemical messengers out, which causes massive inflammation. And what happens is, when that macrophage doesn't work, it can't eat or destroy virus cells and other types of cancer cells like it's supposed to do, and it causes a massive increase in heart disease and in diabetes and cancer, and apparently autism. And these guys are linking a lot of that together, and this product, this compound called nagalase. In fact, I did a show last Saturday night, it's gone viral pretty much, on Hagman and Hagman. It's called Because Time is Short is the name of the show, and I did a 2-hour explanation on the eugenics protocol of the planet and what's being done to reduce the population of the planet that we don't know about. And that entire thing about the nagalase and the macrophages was included on that. If people want to go into more detail, again, that's Hagman and Hagman. You can also get that on an iPod download. Now, you want to talk also about gender manipulation right now this morning, and why 4-year-old children are their parents are agreeing to take them in to have their sex changed, and why 15-year-old girls are being allowed to have their sex changed without parental permission. And all of this is being part of what's happened with the Bruce Jenner fiasco. And it all started with Ellen DeGeneres back in the 90s, and now it's gone on to the Bruce Jenner thing here in 2015. And this whole identity confusion, sexual identity confusion, which is starting to get rampant now in the elementary schools.
So what is it? What is gender manipulation?
Well, what happens is this. When a human being, when animals are born, when mammals are born, when they're conceived, they're conceived as females. That's what we learned in embryology at Florida State in 1975. And Dr. Viso was my professor. And what happens during the first trimester, the woman starts to secrete testosterone if the child has an XY chromosome complement, which means if it's a little boy. So the little boy starts getting chromosomes, or the chromosomes start requiring the mom to release testosterone. When that happens is the clitoris turns into a penis, the ovaries turn into testicles, and the child becomes a male. He goes from a right brain dominated hemisphere to a left brain dominated hemisphere, which is the male brain. What happens is if you start introducing what's called exogenous estrogens into the food supply, or chemically into the food supply, like in the meats or in the poultry or in the beef or in the eggs or in different types of pesticides or in soy products, because soy will do the same thing because it's like an estrogen compound. What happens is the woman can't produce sufficient quantities of testosterone to cause the proper sexual differentiation at the cell level. And when that happens, the little boy is born with a right brain dominant hemisphere brain, which is the female brain. The genitalia are much, much smaller than they're supposed to be. And you have what's called, like I usually call it, a metro boy. They're kind of a cross between a female and a male. That doesn't mean they're gay. It just means that they were chemically castrated during utero is what happened, against their own will, against the mother's wishes, because she probably didn't know she was doing it. And what ends up happening is that causes a lot of gender confusion, because these children at that point are basically being born extremely feminized. With women, little girls, if that happens to them, they start going into puberty early. They start having all kinds of health problems, ovarian cysts, et cetera, at very young ages. And so what ends up happening, it creates a big problem throughout the entire genosphere. And so the reality is these children are no longer alpha males. They have the right brain dominant female hemisphere, these little boys, and they like to go shopping and wear tight jeans and that kind of stuff. They're not really interested in girls. And that's what's really happening right now as far as the transgender issue with these young children. It's basically these children, again, I'm going to repeat it, are being chemically castrated in utero against their mother's knowledge and, of course, against that child's wishes, because that child had no say-so in any of this. And this goes on throughout the entire spectrum of all the different foods, all the different chemicals, and then we have the whole problem with the GMOs. The GMOs cause a complete change in the epigenetics of the body. You can look that up online and watch it on YouTube, watch some stuff on what epigenetics is. It's what happens as far as, it's not necessarily what we thought back in the 90s and the 80s when we were doing that big experiment on mapping the human genome. We thought we'd figure out how the genes work, and then we started finding out that a lot of these genes are switched on and switched off based upon environmental variables. So if you're exposed to certain pesticides, that gene gets switched off or switched on, et cetera, et cetera. The problem with all that, Harry, is that what happens is when that person is born from a mother whose genes have been switched off, because they have that certain disease that's because of the pesticides, their genes are born, they're born that way with those genes switched off. The next set of generation of children are born that way. So indeed, whatever your grandparents ate directly affects you today. We didn't realize this until just the last 15 years. There's been a lot of books that have been written on that now. It's called the study of epigenetics. And it also goes back to the law of the cause and effect and how the environment that the person is in, including the positive attitude that they have if they come down with cancer or the negative attitude they have when they come down with cancer, affects the epigenetics of the cell and what turns off and what turns on. It's kind of like when Jesus went into his own hometown, he could do no miracles there because of their lack of faith or lack of belief. In other words, he was in such a negative energy field around these people that were in his own hometown that he didn't do any miracles there. The same thing is true. If you're around people that think you're going to die if you have cancer and everybody around you keeps telling you that you're going to die, you're going to die, you're going to die, chances are you're probably going to die. And see, that's what people don't understand is the positive belief that we have directly controls the turning and turning off of certain genes in our body. And it's called epigenetics. And it also deals with the contamination of the food supply and GMO foods and all of the above. So it's a very interesting topic. If we had more than 15 minutes, I could actually go into a detail about that and talk about that. But that's all directly, again, affected by the transgender initiation. When you start giving these little boys high amounts of estrogen in utero, it affects that generation, the next generation, the next generation, the next generation, all the way down. Everybody gets affected. And again, I believe it's part of the great eugenics program that was implemented in the World Health Health Organization and the United Nations back in the 60s to reduce the population of the planet, because we're having 100 million people getting born extra every year on the planet. They know they have to do something. All of these other types of protocols haven't been working very well. So now it seems like they're going after the human immune system with this nagalase and with all these other chemicals that we're being injected with that are causing all of these cytokine storms and the deactivation of our macrophages, which are the body's ability to fight the cancer and the diseases. Plus, they also increase the risk of heart disease and cancer when those macrophages are reduced as far as their availability because of the cytokines they release, causing all the inflammation in the arterial walls.
Ted, let me, I only got about 2 minutes here. Let me ask you this. Incredible explanation, by the way. So is the health community or the medical community aware of this ingestion of extra levels of estrogen? I mean, is there anything being done?
Of course. Yes, Perry. We've known that for many, many generations. They've known this since the 50s and the 60s. But the government's pretty much silent on it. They don't really care because, remember, if they can feminize the male population so the male population doesn't want to breed, they reduce the population growth. This whole thing's about the eugenics protocol that was started back with Darwin back in the 1850s in Survival of the Fittest, which was carried on with Margaret Sanger into the 1900s, which was adopted by Adolf Hitler. And of course, a lot of the people from Operation Paperclip that were brought into the United States were all part of the MK Ultra protocol, and a lot of the Nazi concentration camps experiments, they continued through the MK Ultra protocol in the United States with the Nazi rocket scientists and the Nazi chemical scientists they brought into the United States. I mean, this is just history. I mean, this is not conspiracy like ooh-ah, ooh-ah. This is what's going on, and people need to understand there's a major problem in the United States right now. In fact, if you go to healthmasters.com, that's my website, healthmasters.com with an S, HealthMasters. It'll give you a link to that show that I did with Hagman and Hagman. It gives you the entire 30 things that the eugenicists and the New World Order are doing to reduce the population of the planet. And of course, when all things else fail, and if we have a major financial collapse, then they'll bring us to war again, and that'll of course reduce the population even more because we'll have huge casualties from that. So it's going to be an interesting next 6 months, and I want to see what happens by the end of this year, and if the United States can survive this transition, because so many people are talking about the Shemitah year, what's going on. We've had a huge precipitous drop in the Chinese stock market the last month. We have the largest shorting of gold, I think, ever a few weeks ago out of China. All kinds of things are starting to converge into like a perfect storm. And several of the top newsletter writers are saying you have to really watch September and October of this year. That's next month and the following month. And if you're in the equities market, there are a lot of them are suggesting that you pull out of the equities market, go into precious metals or go into cash and take your profits out now. And I think that's a really good advice.
I'm out of time. You're amazing. All right, let me just say to our viewers and listeners, Healthmasters, that's with an S.com, or bodybyted.com. Keep up the good work, friend. I want to come back and do the autism thing with you. That absolutely fascinates me. And if there's a breakthrough there, boy, we need to know about it. So let's schedule a time to do that, okay?
Let's do it, but have your guys call me at my, you got my home number, give me a call, and we'll do it, or you can send me an email.
Okay, thanks, bud. Talk to you soon. All right, we'll see you next time on Focus Today.
Hi, I'm Jim, and I work at theDove TV. Every weekday between 6 and 8 a.m., our award-winning news and sports team bring you the best morning show around. It's live, it's honest, and it's a whole lot of fun. And you help make it happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to air local programs that share your voice by making a secure online donation at our website, theDove.us.